curiosity is actually a form of uncertainty. It's us being thankful for uncertainty. Because if you truly knew everything, there would be nothing to be curious about. Burnout lives in the moment where you are not working. Sometimes we want things that we don't even, like, we think we want until we do it. If I do it for its own sake and I find myself really enjoying it, then, only then, it's time to start thinking about what can this become from a practical standpoint.
We are so lucky to be with one of my favorite thinkers, writers on the internet. The ideas that you're about to hear from Lawrence are so deep, but at the same time, honest and at the same time practical. It gives us a moment to really stop and think through the things that we put in the back of our minds. We know we should deal with it, but we don't deal with it. Well, Lawrence does the hard work of sorting through them, guiding us through it. I'm so excited to have you here, Lawrence, to talk about your inner compass. How do we move through the fears that we have in life and just be who we are and stop suffering? I mean, that was the beginning of your book. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Vicky. It's a real joy to be here with you.
You mentioned in the book that we suffer because we don't know who we really are. And there's a tension between us thinking that both we know who we are, but also thinking that we can expand who we are.
So, self-understanding is this word that's kind of somehow wrapped in mysticism at times, where it's like, oh, to know yourself means that you have to isolate yourself and be in a cave, or you meditate your way to enlighten, or something like that. But it fundamentally is about aligning your inner values with the outer world. There is a very careful interplay that you have to have with the world, because we all have to function within it, we all have to operate within it. And the question really is, how do you do that without discounting your inner values? And I think that's where people have the most tension. Do I have to discount my belief system or values to fit in? And this whole nature of fitting in is what I refer to as conditioning throughout the book. And I make the tie that suffering ultimately stems from conditioning. Because when you think about the baseline state, and there's a trope about childhood and presence and that nature. And as a father myself, I have firsthand experience in this now. But there really is this state of having a complete disregard for the past or the future. You are just here, and play and curiosity are at the forefront of the mind. It's not even a question. But as we all know, that baseline is disturbed. But what's interesting is that if we are born with the attribute of presence, that inherently cannot cause discontent in a sense, right? It can't be birthed from itself. So it's truly about how the external layers of norms, judgments, pursuit of status, and things of that nature impact our way of viewing ourselves that causes suffering to arise. And I feel that most of our attention is directed to what we need to do externally, to what we need to pursue, to what we need to achieve. And that is because we have to operate within the world. But there is always a point in which that becomes not just tense, but a point of anxiety, of frustration, of stress, where you become aware of the conditioning that is layered upon you, but you feel kind of helpless because you don't know what to do next. And I think the pursuit of wanting to do what comes next or figuring that out is what I refer to as self understanding.
Hmm. I mean, you mentioned the inner values we have and how it interplays with the external world. I actually find it really difficult to articulate what those inner values are in the first place. It's as we are interacting with the world that we feel like, oh, this is not exactly how I would have done it, or, oh, but does that feel right to me? So, what is this inner value? How can we even discover it and know exactly, hey, this is within my value, this is something else I can be flexible with?
I feel like values a lot of time come from things that are done for its own sake, where if there was no particular incentive that is associated with this belief system, of a reward or something where it has to convert into something tangible or you are allotted for it. Like, what if you strip all that away, what do you find yourself just inherently drawn to? And a lot of people, for example, have this value of curiosity, right? It's so interesting because curiosity is actually a form of uncertainty. It's us being thankful for uncertainty because if you truly knew everything, there would be nothing to be curious about. So it's a form of gratitude. So, in that sense, when people say that my value is curiosity, what you're actually valuing is a healthy relationship with uncertainty. But it's funny because uncertainty causes so much fear. Our condition is to fear uncertainty. But when you say I value it, that means that fundamentally, if you were to remove all the conditioning, if you were to remove, oh, what's the point of this curiosity? Like, where is it leading? Is it going to lead to wealth or status? If you remove that and you just see uncertainty as something that you're grateful for, that you love the fact you don't know everything about this particular field, this particular domain, then you understand why it's a value because it's stripped away from all the other things that make it so extrinsically motivated. So that's a question I like to ask myself when it comes to your value system internally is what are things that are done for its own sake that you find inherently valuable that are not attached to a particular reward and understand what that is. Of course, the element of practicality and where if you choose to embody that value professionally, like that opens up a whole nother window. But if you're just asking yourself, what are my inherent values? What is a value system? Without all of that stuff, just start there. And that's where I would kind of direct people's attention to first.
I love this. I got goosebumps listening to you say this because I think it brings out several interesting points that we will break it up with. Number one is this idea of, okay, the inner self, the things that we just inherently are drawn to, and time disappears as we're doing these things. Music is, let's say, for example, one of them. But then our brain kicks in and be like, wait a second, this is a waste of time. I'm never going to be the music star that I have always dreamed to be. And actually, one of my students, mentioned to me this exactly of, music is a passion. It is a clear passion, but how can I carve out time for it when I know I could be doing something more productive, which is the second thing I want to bring up, which is productivity, right? That we think, well, creativity, that's silly. Being authentic, that's silly. I need to not waste my time. So I'll put those two out there first, and I really want to hear, how can we hold these opposing thoughts and actually reconcile them and not have that turn into an anxious feeling of, oh, I feel so guilty for enjoying the things that I actually care about.
That's such a fascinating frame because you're right. It is this default thought that we have that every activity has to lead to something, it has to become something. And I would argue that you don't really know whether something is going to become anything or whether you even want that to become anything until you first actually do it. Right. And for example, music is a great example because I actually was in the corporate world years ago, and my first leap out of it was into music. So I was doing a lot of music in my spare time, and then I thought to myself, dang, if only I had 40 hours a week, like, oh, I would be the best musician ever, and all the time would be free to me. I'd be so productive. So, I actually, saved up a decent amount of money for my job, and then I quit. And I was like, I'm gonna give this thing a good shot. Very early on, I noticed I don't want to even do this for 40 hours a week. I thought I did. I thought that's what I wanted. But in reality, when I had all that time available, when I thought I could be most productive with that time, then I didn't really even want it. So I feel like a lot of time people associate productivity with the amount of time you have available to do something. But a lot of it is a question of like desire. Is this something that you truly want to dedicate your attention to? Like it's ultimately an attention thing. So when people say, well, I don't know if this is going to become anything, or I feel bad because my time could have been better spent doing something else, I would encourage people to treat that as a more of an exploratory phase where you're not asking about the practical side of this. Like, I think you can divorce an activity from its practical benefit. You and you can do that, let's say, for example, if you have a job, you're already working somewhere and you don't have to think about money, you don't have to think about these elements, then you could view what you're already doing to make money and so forth as like a patron of your curiosity, right? That it is funding your ability to not see this activity as a productive activity. It is giving you the permission to do that. So when you enter that space, you don't have to think, oh, this has to be anything. You could just say, I'm in a great fortunate position where this doesn't have to be something. It doesn't have to turn into views, status, money. I could just focus on this because all that's taken care of from the other thing. So you could kind of design your life or structure it in a way where you put these frames in place where you're optimizing for, hey, let's explore this to even decide if I even want it. Sometimes we want things that we don't even like we think we want until we do it. And then second, if I do it for its own sake and I find myself really enjoying it, then only then it's time to start thinking about what can this become from a practical standpoint. But those two conditions have to be satisfied first before you even start thinking about that. And I feel a lot of people just jump into that last thing without setting the foundation with those first two things.
This is such a great frame breaking moment for, I think, several reasons. Number one is just you're putting in the nuance into the process of figuring out who we are, right? We feel like, oh, it's black and white. I either, let's say, do music or I don't. I either make money with money or I don't. But actually, it's a process with many steps in the middle where we have to first just check it out. Hey, is this something I actually want, or is it something I think I want, as you mentioned? And I want to bring it to this thing that I struggled with forever, which is I think I am self aware, but actually, the things I thought I knew is actually self deception. So I think, oh, yeah, of course, Vicky cares about curiosity. And then I go, oh, but then Vicky's trying to nail every single thing in this field before feeling like she could ever talk about it. But as you pointed out just now, that curiosity is actually valuing the uncertainty, knowing that it could throw us into chaos, but still care about it. Tell me more about how do you reconcile curiosity with this need to feel like, oh, I won't know enough. I won't know enough to share with others until I have all the answers.
It's interesting, Vicky, because I think whenever people enter creative fields or anything where they feel like they have a sense of agency over the particular activity, it always stems from curiosity, right? Like you're interested in it, you don't know where it's going, and that's what makes it fun. And then a lot of times, as you kind of put it, I want to nail everything, right? Like, and this you feel that kind of seeping in. And what does it mean to nail everything? Well, to nail everything means that you want things to be certain. You have certain goals or you have certain objectives that either you've set or unsubconsciously you see other people doing and you think, well, I should set that goal myself. And the more tangible that goal is, the more concrete it is, the more you desire certainty. So fundamentally, given our definition of curiosity, that pulls you away from being curious and that makes you want the thing. You want it to be very, very concrete and achieved, right? And I think that explains why a lot of people, for example, burn out or a lot of people kind of quit doing their endeavors and so forth. And like burnout, for example, I think the misconception is that it's all about you're working too much and you are just spending 100 hours a week on whatever you're doing. But I actually feel like burnout lives in the moment where you are not working, where
Oh,
you're constantly thinking about it when you should be present with your family or just with the food in front of you eating, but you're just thinking about the goal that you need to achieve, the objective in mind. And it's that relentless cycle of thought. That's where burnout lives. A lot of time when you're actually working, you are in the zone or so forth or in a state of flow. But it's about the thoughts of, this didn't hit, or why am I not doing this? This is not getting there. Like that's where the burnout truly is. So I really feel that it is a function of desiring certainty in moments where uncertainty is actually the governor. Like that's actually what makes it exciting and fulfilling. And the question is, how do you cultivate that sense of curiosity, aka the ability to face the unknown and to embrace it as opposed to fearing it? Because fundamentally, all fear is the tension of uncertainty. Like any fear you may have, whether it's health, wealth, or relationships, are always tied to the desire for an anticipated result. Always. So why are people why are people scared about money? It's because they fear that they won't have enough. Or people that are sick, they fear that they're not going to get better, right? So it's not the thing itself that causes fear, but it's the uncertainty underneath it. That is what causes all fear. So really, it's just a slight framing shift, and we have to keep doing that frame shift anytime there is fear to really help it dissolve.
You gotta tell us more about this framing shift. What do you do there exactly when you spot something like that?
So I guess I could draw upon the book, and I have a principle in here which is essentially to reflect, and um, I guess just real as a quick primer, I could explain what I mean by these principles. So in the book, I talk about the three principles of self-understanding, because self-understanding could be a kind of abstract concept. So what are actually three pillars or principles that make this very digestible? And I kind of think about it in the form of a very simple diagram. You have the world as an oval, and then there's just the self, you within it, right? And it's kind of what we described earlier. It's you interacting with the world, receiving feedback from the world, and helping to assimilate that into your perspective of the world. And there has to be an interplay of the two. So, with that context, the first principle is to reflect. And that's where you kind of focus on the self. And this is more of what's going on underneath the hood of it all. Because my thesis here is that the things that have built us, like the foundation of our being, has actually been built by other people. So, or randomness, like our genes, our upbringing, our culture. These are like such important parts of who we are, and we had no say over it. It blows my mind every time we think about that. So to say that you kind of know yourself is kind of funny because there's so much that you have to understand from a bottom up perspective, right? If you were to remove all this. So the self is about how do you peel that away and then get to who you are without all those layers of conditioning. And the second principle is to relate, which is the larger oval. And the reason why I put relate in here is because relationship is a mirror. It's like the way you view others will reflect the way you view yourself. So to understand yourself, it's very, very important to understand how you treat other people because it's a mirror. And the last principle is to create. And you could think about the oval with the self and the kind of the boundary of the self dissolving. So there's motion between the two. And create is about taking what you've reflected upon and what you've picked up through your relationships and imbue that with kind of this experiential knowledge, and then you inject it or you put it out into the world through creating things. And that's how you share what you learned along the way. So we have reflect, relate, create. Now, when it comes to whenever I'm scared of something or I fear something, that relate part is quite important for me because whenever I'm fearing something, I know that there's some uncertainty that's making me scared. And most of that time, that uncertainty comes from something I expect. I'm expecting something and I'm scared that that expectation will not be met. And then I do a journaling practice. But one really important thing that I want to mention here is that journaling, some people like they'll hear journaling and be like, "Ugh, all right, bro. I get the journaling thing. I've heard it many times. I've tried it. There's no real use." I feel like the reason why this happens is because a lot of people treat a journal as a diary. And they're two different things. A diary is about the what's of life, like what I did, what I felt, and so forth, right? You're just cataloging the events of your day. A journal is when you ask the why behind things, right? Why you felt it, why you did it, why you experienced this. And when you ask the why behind things, you get to understand, especially behind fear, is that there's some expectation that's been planted by another or something that you've planted yourself unconsciously. And that helps you sort through all that. And when you get to a sufficient why, like the how becomes obvious. It becomes very clear. Oh yeah, okay, I feel this anxiety at a work party because all these people seem like they just care about money, but I really care about pursuing what I feel interested in. But then I have a good amount of money saved up. Why do I feel like I have to be here regardless? What's going on with that? Like, you see how this kind of entry invites deeper exploration as opposed to I went to a work party, I felt anxious, I didn't like it, right? So
Yeah.
by asking the why behind things, I could clearly understand what's going on with the fear and then find ways myself to reframe that or recontextualize that. And that's been pretty huge for me.
I think what you're mentioning here that I find it to be a really light bulb moment is instead of bringing the curiosity at the beginning, bring it to the end. Instead of just being like, "Oh, I'm curious about the how I feel at the work party," not just there, but bring it to the end, the outcome. Oh, okay. And then it became like this. Why is that? And we always think that the answer is out there somewhere, like someone else has the right answer, but actually we can and probably should, if we want to end suffering, to point it inwards and be curious just about, oh, hey, how come I feel this way? What is it that's making me feel this way? And be open to explore it. I think one of the things with identity is sometimes we become really rigid because we want to protect it. We want that certainty of this is who I am, this is what I do, and anything I'm not good at, I'm not never going to touch that because I want to protect the safety of who I am. And I don't ever want to have an identity crisis. But as I have also explored, who I am, why do I think the way I think, why are these repeating patterns that I don't want in my life show up? You kind of have to be open to an identity crisis of sorts. Do you deal with that? How do you deal with that?
I mean, I think the utility of safety has a hard limit. I think safety, it gives us the sense of belonging. Like you said, it gives us the sense of having an identity to ground yourself in. But it's interesting because safety and curiosity a lot of time are on two opposite sides of the spectrum. So you're prioritizing two different things. And one analogy that I think is quite salient here is, you have the classic fork in the road. Let's say you're hiking and you see a fork in the road, and one is well traveled, and then one is like you get the feeling it goes somewhere, but no footsteps, right? And the obvious question is, well, okay, what path do you take? But I felt like there was another interesting wrinkle is like, what if we throw in how many times you visited this fork, right? And then how would that change your behavior? So the first time you approach this fork, well, you're just kind of, all you do is you just want to get out of there, right? So you're like, okay, I'm just going to take the safe path. There's no question because it's unfamiliar and that you take that. Now, what if it's the 10th time you visited this fork? First question I have is why are you there 10 times? There's something intriguing about it that keeps on making you wanting to visit it, right? Now, at this point, still the safety might edge out over the exploratory elements. So you're like, I'm still gonna go that route, the route I always go on, but like a seed of curiosity gets planted in the other one, right? Now the last scenario is what if you're there 100 times? Okay. You're there 100 times. You keep revisiting this in some form. The question you're going to have is not about that other route. It's actually going to be directed to yourself. You're going to start asking questions like, why can't I get on here? This is my 100th time being here. Why can't I just do it? And you start just like asking yourself these questions about just do it. And and this example or analogy kind of illustrates how we will prioritize safety up to a point. But once the uncertainty of the other path becomes more salient, or we become more intrigued, or you actually feel like it ties in, it's more aligned with your inner values, as we described earlier, you're going to keep visiting this fork. You're going to keep visiting it. And that's why the whole thing of people that do all the bucket list items when they're about to die is so prevalent, because they're like, hey, I visited this fork so many times, like, and now I know the finish line is here. There's no question I'm just going to do it, right? The path that is not traveled starts to look well traveled to them. It looks so obvious for them to take it. So I really think that this is a matter of repetition. And if you find yourself continuing to be here, I think the truth is your primary value is no longer safety and certainty. Like, the more often you come here, it's a great indicator that actually the value of curiosity is starting to supersede it. And it's really important to listen to that, because yourself is trying to tell you something.
How do we trust that voice? Because it's so easy to dismiss, like, oh yeah, I am interested in the other paths, but my brain kicks in. Reason 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Why would you take that? How do we trust ourselves and our intuition?
Yeah, I think it's helpful here to first define what intuition is. So, the way I like to think about it is, okay, you mentioned reason. So there are three things in your life, probably the three biggest things in your life, that you could get a lot of other stuff wrong, but you get these three right, you're gonna be fairly content and happy. So the three things are: one, where you are, where you live, right? The second is what you work on, and three is who you're with. So where you live, what you work on, and who you're with. Now, you might think, okay, these three things are so important that rationality is what is going to guide you through these three things. But if we take an honest look at how we've approached these three things in our lives, and I'm guessing all the listeners too, you're going to know that rationality has a hard limit. You probably did not make a pros and cons list to determine who you're going to marry, or maybe you have done a lot of analysis around a given area to determine if you're going to live there, but ultimately, the decision you made had something to do with a scope beyond that. So, intuition is ultimately like, so here we have the limit of logic, and then here's the decision you ultimately make right here. That gap is your intuition. That's basically what intuition is, right? So, we all use it. We all use it for some of the most important things. And the question here is, well, how do I know if it's right? How do I know if it's guiding me to the right place? And the truth is that your intuition has to be tested by reality to earn its reliability. You have to keep testing it, and paradoxically, a lot of times that it told you it was wrong, like when you had those moments, that's actually giving it the ability for you to trust it. So you have to continue to experience things, to test your intuition, find out, oh, okay, I did that, and maybe that wasn't like the right move at the time, but at least I picked up a lesson from that. And that kind of contributes to whatever it is. So there really is an element of kind of fearlessness that goes with it, but it is really the whole thing gets more solidified when you do this element of trying to understand who you are a little bit better, instead of just feeling like, oh, my intuition is guiding me to the right place. Kind of do the work of having to understand, does it make sense for me to do this? And knowing that I'm not going to get the answer right away, but I have to kind of test it continuously anyway. um, and I have this kind of metaphor here where we have like the inner compass. That's what the book is named for. And we have true north, which is like where you have conviction and what you feel like is right, where your intuition may be guiding you towards. And then anything outside of that is basically what I refer to as conditioning, where you're being pulled away from what you have conviction in doing. But the only way to ensure that your intuition is properly calibrated is that there's actually a magnet on top here. And this magnet is the element of self understanding, to reflect, relate, create these three principles, and continuing to do that. Because in the beginning, the magnet's really tiny. And anything that's telling you, hey, don't do this, or you feel like you shouldn't do this, it's going to blow you away. Right. And this is why in high school, we just do what everyone else is doing. We only want to date someone because of how physically attractive they are. That's it. But as you grow older, a lot of time the magnet gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you have experiences and lessons that you've picked up from your intuition, where it went wrong, where it was right, and it starts to hold your pointer more and more. And what we're really trying to do is to build that magnet up, not by the time we're almost dead, but to try to do it earlier on in life. And that self reflection and doing these practices really help with that, to make sure that you are aligned and that you can trust your intuition over time.
A few things I want to point out here. Number one is we got to get into the practices because, like you mentioned, right? We hear, oh, journaling, right? I should be doing that. Meditation, oh, yeah, everyone says that. But what is it that we're focusing on in order to get that self understanding? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, I think, as we're talking about this, the inner compass is really becoming a tool for decision making. When you have those difficult decisions that don't have right or wrong answers, every single path you take, there's going to be some pros, there's going to be some cons. During those times, how do you make sure you make the decision that works for you and not working, for someone else, or the things that you think you should want to get to? And those principled decision making is something that we talk about here as well. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, I guess I could start with the decision making one because I have something pop up in my head as you were speaking. I mean, I think whenever you're going to make any decision of any sort, there, like, fear accompanies it, doubt accompanies that decision. And that doubt only exists because you care about what this decision means, right? If you didn't doubt it, if there was no doubt, that means you're indifferent. So the doubt is actually a signal that, hey, this is something that you find valuable, that is important to you. So it's worth trying to kind of quote unquote get it right. But at the same time, that getting it right is also what makes the anxiety rise and the fear rise, and you're just going to keep second guessing yourself, and you just you're going to be in a state of paralysis. And the reason why I think that reflecting is not adequate enough, like, is because your mind could produce the very problems it's trying to solve. Like, if you're just relying purely on the intellect to guide you, then it basically can just lead you astray, or it could leave you more distraught than if you were to just, like, oh, I'll just do it and just see what happens, right? And I think that's where the things like relate come into play, and being able to talk about what your particular decision may be, and with people that you feel like are, like, that you trust wholeheartedly, you trust their judgment, you trust their inner compasses. And I guess for like me and you, it would be our respective partners, or for people that have someone that they feel like they have a connection with, where they see them for who they are, really, and not for what they have to offer or anything like that, right? Because I feel like decision making, if you just make it a complete solo affair, it could be really paralyzing. And the whole reason why we have loved ones, the whole reason why we have friends and so forth, is to speak about them. But at the same time, in the end, you're going to be the one making that jump. You're going to be the one that is making that leap into whatever you're doing. And I do feel like there is always an element of wonder in whatever decision that you're going to make, right? If the decision is purely driven by fear, I'm doing this because I feel like I have to do it, then chances are it's not going to bear too much fruit, because you're not entering it with the state of wonderment, with what could happen. What are the benefits of this that I haven't even thought about, that my intellect cannot think about. And if you're entering the decision with that kind of question, then I think it's driven by curiosity, and that's a good place to start. So it's funny because we do this for small decisions and big decisions. Like, it doesn't matter what the scope of decision is, there is always going to be doubt and fear around it. But just know that even when you make the decision, whatever the result may be, it's going to yield some lesson. It will yield some lesson. And that lesson, you're going to add that to your bank of lessons that compound to make your intuition more and more strong over time. So you're actually building your intuition by making all these decisions as well.
Something so amazing there I want to point out with a personal experience for me, which is those moments where I feel like, oh, I should be making this decision this way because of all the logical reasons, but my intuition tells me something different. And I decide to say, okay, well, let me trust this. Let me see what happens. I notice in myself that it is a willingness to trust myself and take responsibility for my decisions. I remember very clearly when I was in corporate, there were so many important decisions for the business, but I was just like, oh, you know what? Like, this one's the easiest. Let's go with that. I'm giving away my engagement, my agency to the problem because I think, oh, responsibility is not with me. I don't want to take this. But when there are moments where I decide, okay, I've done the pro and con list, but anyway, I want to trust myself and decide on something. Let's say, for example, I recently went to a creator event. Everything in me was like, no, you don't have time for this. It's so far. It's in the middle of nowhere. There were a long list of why I shouldn't go, but intuition was just like, hey, you probably meet some cool people. If you didn't, anyway, the story. Trusted that. And then when I showed up there, I made it a good event for myself because I believed in it. And I think that point of having agency and belief in yourself to make the right decision, like you said, then brings the lessons and help you build that intuition so that you know you can trust yourself better.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because we all want to learn, right? Like we all say learning is a virtue, it's something that we love, enjoy, and we love doing it in the form of like gaining knowledge because there's not much friction there. Oh, I love to read or I love to listen to a bunch of podcasts and there is no doubt for you to overcome to pick up something and do that, right? But in the context of learning about ourselves and trusting ourselves, the the funny thing is you can't do that through knowledge, you have to do that through experience. And I think that's where the friction comes in because once you know that the learning comes from actually doing something or making a decision and converting that decision into an action, it becomes more scary. But it is actually fundamentally a form of learning. It really is. Like everything is learning. So that same sentiment you have of I love learning, I autodidact or whatever, you can it's the same principle applies in the context of your own life. The only difference is that you're doing it through experiences. And just in the same way as when you pick up a book, you're unsure if it's going to be any good. Like you're like, I don't know, is it worth my time? And then you start reading it, and then you're like, okay, maybe, and you kind of keep going. Oh, and then okay, not bad. Oh, good. Like the same kind of journey of uncertainty, and then you choose to invest a little bit of yourself, and then there's more of this agency, and then that converts into being there, and then viewing that one scary atmosphere as, oh, there's an opportunity for me to talk to this person, and I want to show up here, and like that really happens through the very fact that you decided to learn about yourself through that, right? Like that very nature of you going to that event, you're basically saying, I'm going to learn something today. I want to go learn something today, whether it's through someone else or just like about the way I interact with people by me showing up. And those lessons are so, so valuable to build up trust in yourself for sure.
And that comes back to being willing to decide on, it's not just time that I value. It's not just how much is this time available to you, how much is this time going to turn into something else, but like you mentioned earlier, it's about the attention and valuing what am I interested in? There's probably something deeper there that I can explore. And I think we don't spend enough time thinking about our attention. It's always been grabbed by, the whatever feed that it's on our phone. And if we can say, oh, a book cover sounds interesting. I don't know if it's going to be good, but let me find out. Just making that small shift really changes how we view ourselves and value our own interests as well.
Yeah. And what's interesting, I read this quote from Kahneman, and it was about something he changed his mind about. And he said, I used to believe that people were optimizing for just completely being present in the present moment, because that's what I feel like I should. think. And then he's like, what I learned through all my studies and so forth is that what people really want are anticipated memories. People want to have experiences where later they could look back on it and be like, dang, that was nice. And those memories, and this is me talking here, not Kahneman, like the reflection I had from that was that those memories are generally birthed through small surprises, things that kind of made that day a story worthy day. Like it shook it up a little bit where you had to actually decide something like you were doubting, but then you made the move anyway. You made that little push anyway. And then that becomes a memory. Like those are the things that you'll look back on. And as Kahneman said, will actually give you the most well being. When you have when you do things in your life where you build anticipated memories, and so much of that comes downstream from trusting yourself and going forward with your intuition even when you feel like reason may be absent or or you're like I don't see it here. Moving forward on that to learn about yourself really goes a long way for that.
That reminds me of the artist's way and the exercise of just going out there somewhere new by yourself and just noticing what's happening. Because, like you said, the surprises, we all love that. Oh, I didn't expect this to be here, but this was a beautiful finding. This was a funny thing. This was something good. And that well, leads back to uncertainty is a good form of uncertainty. And even though I think for a lot of people who especially on this channel, who are proud of their intellect, of the analytical prowess that we bring to the job. A lot of people tend to reject creativity. That's not for me. That's the people who can actually paint, who can actually sing, who can actually play the musical instruments. But in your framework of reflect, relate, and create is right at the center where you start to blend yourself with the world. What does create actually mean?
Yeah, in the instances of the people you described there, I think the big element is that people mistake creativity for art. So they'll look at a painting or a TV show or a blog post or a YouTube video and think, ah, I can't do that. I'm just like a non-creative person that just does non-creative things in my leisure time or so forth, right? But that's conditioning. This conditioning because you're using an external barometer to make an internal definition, right? So what creativity is at its core, without the conditioning element, is something that you do with agency. It's something that is truly aligned with your interests at that particular time, but you approach it with intention. That's ultimately what creativity is. So, like, it's interesting because let's say we're having this conversation right now, and let's say instead I just called you and I'm like, "Hey, what's been going on?" And you tell me about your day and so forth. We're not gonna really interpret that as an act of creativity because there wasn't this kind of intention behind what we're talking about or why we're there and so forth. Whereas you put mics in front of us and we're on, this recording software, and all of a sudden we're like in this dance of dialogue. It feels like we are creating something and knowing that, oh, this may go out and people may listen to it. Like there's the thing is that we're fundamentally doing very similar things, but the frame here is that we're approaching this with intention. Same thing applies with like interior designers, but like, they're kind of just moving stuff around and making things look good. We do that in the confines of our own home, but we don't think that's creativity. Whereas the interior designer is like, oh, that's a creative person. It's ultimately just agency and the intention behind it. So when I talk about creating, what I'm encouraging people to do is to do something where you're going in with the intention that you really want to be there, that you want to do this. It's not something that you have to do, it's something that you get to do, and that you are approaching it with no other expectation but that. And that in itself is a creative act. So, and I think the reason why this is so important is because for most of our lives or most of the day, we don't do things for its own sake. We almost never do it. And if you, like one practice I mentioned in the book is like, if you spend, let's say, like an hour a day just doing something for its own sake and creating, right? Not making art. It's different. You can make it whatever it is, but then you're doing it because you truly want to spend your time and attention in that way. That's such a beautiful avenue to knowing yourself because you're doing it without any incentives, without anything layered on from the outside about what this needs to become. So that is a great starting point. An hour a day, you do that. If it's too much, 30 minutes a day, just something where you do it for its own sake. And interestingly enough, like journaling is a form of creativity if that's what you really want to do with your time and attention. So I really encourage people to do that because it's going to be a great outlet for the experiences and the memories that you have. It's gonna come out somehow. It's gonna come out somehow. Just like in the same way, us getting together here is a reflection of your interests, my interests, somehow blending together to bring us together here. Same thing happens when you just do anything for its own sake. You'll see everything that you've picked up come out in some sense. And it's a kinetic expression of yourself. And that really gives you a great insight into, dang, all right, this is who I really am outside of all the expectations that are layered upon me.
Tell us a little bit more about a day in Lawrence's life. I think that will really show us, there are moments of creativity where you just trust something is going to come out, and there's intentional notice because you write more to that, which, by the way, if you have not checked out more to that, you have to. I will put the link down below. But how do you structure your day so that you intentionally create the life that you want to live?
So every day starts with a run. I always go for a 30-minute run or I swim, and that isn't necessarily for the physical health benefits. It's much more for my mental health, and it just gives me that added hit of clarity really, and I don't have to rely on like caffeine or substances to do that. And yeah, I really try to optimize that morning just for like, yeah, can I be a clear thinker? Not just for my work, but being a clear thinker makes me a better husband, makes me a better father, friend. So it's not just for my work, it's just for life in general. So I try to start that way. And then this kind of fluctuates, but every day I also do a journaling practice. And I also tie that in with like meditation for about 10 minutes or so forth. I do want to mention though that meditation though is not what I would consider to be a reflective activity. And I think that's where there's a lot of misconceptions because meditation is the art of doing nothing, right? It's like the absence of thought. But reflection is actually the usage of thought to get deeper into kind of who you are. So reflection is my journaling practice where I'm actually, using my mind and trying to explore it better. So I'm able to kind of combine those two practices together to kind of get the yin and yang element going on. And that gives me a nice oasis of time where I'm doing everything just for its own sake. And I really try to have that as a part of my day, something that I do for its own sake without any external reward attached to it. And yeah, well, right now is like book launch stuff. So in the morning, it's a lot of book stuff, but I try to write for about an hour or two each day. And, you know, I think I'm sure people here are going to be aware of the whole adage of, well, if you're going to do some sort of practice, make sure you do it every single day and make X's and don't break the chain and so forth. I feel like with writing, for example, I write every single day, but I write for myself every single day. But I may write to publish maybe a few times a week. So there's a distinction I make. It's like I could still do the practice consistently. Practice doesn't have to be every single day. So I think that's been an interesting kind of reframing shift for me. So it doesn't feel like I'm forcing myself to do anything when I just don't really want to at the time. And yeah, and then I'll eat and then do some like admin stuff towards the afternoon, talk to people. I think that's really, more I think about it, those three principles do make its way into my life because the afternoon I spend a lot of it just talking to people and doing whether it's interviews or phone calls or emails and so forth. Like it's so important for me to engage with other people and to share not just my own thoughts, but then like to understand other people's experiences. I really feel like there has to be this continuous feedback loop. And I think the truth is that as creatives, a lot of times it can be very isolating, and you can feel quite alone. And I think that's when the reflect part, you're just stared for too long. Like you have to kind of interface with the world, and that's really important. So I bake that into my day, and then after that is family time, hang out with my daughter and wife and so forth. So all that kind of combined to form the basic structure of my day, give or take.
I love that the three pieces not only fit in, but it's a great reminder that even though we think that, oh, okay, I got to focus on myself, so I need to have time that is completely cut off. No one should be disturbing me. But in actually, if you decide to design your life in a way where, yes, there's you time, yes, there's other people's time, and yes, you are committing to blend the two together, like you mentioned, right? There's you and then there's the world, and that interaction is really important. Then we stop feeling like, oh, the world is not dancing with me in the right way. Is rather, how do I dance it with a way so that it works for me, and that you bring it back
Hmm.
to agency. And I think that's knowing that we have the power to be able to engage with that, with the world, even if not everything goes our way.
Yeah. And, when it comes to the world and interacting with people too, I feel like there's also this element of like, there's some people where you're interacting with because there's this particular, not motive, but there's like a concrete reason where, all right, we're doing something for a particular reason. And like, that's great. I mean, we're here together talk about this particular thing. There's intention. And then there's also like other people in your life where there's really no expectation other than you're just hanging out, right? And like one thing that I mention is in the book is just how when it comes to your closest friendships and your closest relationships, there's just one condition behind that, and it's that there is no game that you guys are playing. There's no game. It's unconditional. Ironically, that's the only condition. And with these folks, it's like it's a different kind of frame of mind. And in a very productivity fueled society, sadly, a lot of those folks are kind of left behind when it comes to our attention because we're just optimizing for, well, this every ounce of my time and energy needs to become something. But what's actually going to ground you the most are the people where your relationships were formed without any of the forces of social incentives or anything like that. And a lot of time, that's why your closest friends are childhood friends or friends that you made in adolescence because that's when the arenas of work and wealth were not a thing. So your relationships formed in that way, and they're really really important. And it's I know it's a cliche to say that, but to take some part, not just your day, but like of your life really, to nourish a lot of those relationships because they actually show you a lot more about who you are too, without the kind of I need to be productive that avatar floating around.
How do you bring yourself out of those moments where you feel like, oh, I'm here, let's say I'm at the career event. I'm here to network, right? And there's a part of me that's thinking, oh, got to think about the status, got to think about all of these opportunities. And there's a moment in myself that I recognize where I say, oh, okay, right, this is the me who was too worried about what everyone else is thinking. I can just stay, be here, whatever happens, happens. And there's a small shift, but I actually haven't put that process into something that I'm really aware of. Have you, since you wrote the book on inner compass, have you thought about what is that process when you see, oh, this is what I'm doing, and actually that's not what I want to do, to bring ourselves out of it, to connect with the friend who has nothing to give to us, but it nourishes our soul to talk to them as opposed to doing another productive conversation with someone else.
Yeah, I mean, we could even use that example of when you're going somewhere for a concrete purpose already, right? It's like, okay, well, I'm networking and want to meet so and so and use this as maybe a stepping stone to get somewhere. And what's funny is that the more you enter those kinds of spaces that with that mentality, the more it kind of exudes from you. It becomes very apparent. And I I feel like when it comes to status, for example, like there really is a magnetism that comes from not putting it at the forefront of the mind. And like what you may lose in kind of like gaining status at that point is kind of made up for trust. Like there is this element of, oh, this person is just genuinely curious about what is going on in my life. And I, whether I'm a quote unquote nobody or somebody or whatever, I could just sense the genuine curiosity. And I feel like I do my best to enter really any space with that in mind. Am I a perfect avatar of it? No, but I do try to enter it thinking that I know a lot. I know a decent about my own life, so I would love to learn more about these other people's lives, and regardless of who they may be, and if chance has it where I particularly meet someone that is especially interesting and at the same time has status or whatever, like that's cool, right? But that wasn't necessarily the goal. And I think this ties back really to a lot of the thing of if you are really trying to enter somewhere with a certain goal, like what you want is this particular outcome, then the experience itself is not going to be that great. It's it's just not. And it's like the same thing of when you chase prestige, for example. I think prestige is so valuable only when you get to announce it or when it could be pronounced, right? That 1% of the time that like you're talking about it and it's like, oh, I'm getting the prestige hit. But the other 99% of the time is you have to like be in it. It's it's like, okay, if you got this prestigious thing, then now it's like the 120 hours you have to spend doing it per week or whatever. So there's an asymmetry of attention, really. So what you're really optimizing for is that 99% of what you're actually there for and the experience of it, and knowing that that's actually what's going to be the valuable thing, not just that 1% of what you got. And and I try to factor that in as much as possible, like not just with people but even with my own pursuits. Like in the end, what I'm doing and the way I'm spending my attention is going to be what I remember, as opposed to what my attention yielded in the form of achievements.
Mm. How do we separate that goal of these are the things I want? And we have the beautiful hustle culture who tells us, well, you got to track your numbers seriously. You got to show up every single day doing this thing that you said you want to do. We can do all of those things, but we also want to stay authentic to ourselves, right? And like you mentioned earlier, burnout doesn't just happen in the, oh, I'm tracking all my numbers so I am tired, but it's in, oh, I didn't track it today, I feel so bad now, I've broken the train, that the check marks that I've been doing for so long. How can we be authentic in the pursuit of the things that we want, and also know that there is flexibility, there is an inner compass that can guide us when other people are telling us, hey, the right answer is you should be doing XYZ, forget about your own intuitions, those are wrong, those are doesn't have basis. How do you combine the two together?
I mean, I think that everything we do, we are continuously oscillating between intrinsic motivation and external validation. Like these are the two poles we are continuously oscillating between. And as your question posed, like what we're really trying to do is we're trying to align it, right? That's what it means to live authentically. It's like you can live authentically, but if you end up homeless, like there's the authenticity doesn't have too much to shine, right? So you're trying to align those two things. And the way I think about it is that you can engage in a pursuit intrinsically, right, for what you're doing, but you also want to layer on what I refer to as the pursuit of mastery. And mastery, though, it's not, you're not doing it for the end result. Like mastery is a quest to improve yourself as an end in itself. Like comparisons are not made with other people, but only with prior versions of yourself. That's that's what mastery is. So you, it's like this kind of, self-actualizing force where you're not trying to collect attention necessarily, you're trying to just refine your intuition with what you're doing. And every person has tastes and preferences. that's why they're doing the particular thing in the first place, because they were inspired by their tastes and preferences. So you could still be inspired by what others are doing, right? Like I'm inspired by other writers that I feel are writing from an authentic place and have also been able to be recognized and been able to be like they could continue doing it as a living. Like these are the people that I look to for inspiration. So you see how I try to narrow my filter as much as possible as to who my models of mastery are. And then you could learn from these people. You could learn from them, but through it all, you're still committing to, I want to get better at this myself. And a lot of times this doesn't come with external benchmarks. There's just this awareness that, all right, I'm making improvement here, I'm making improvement here. And then you could look out for some small signals and validation that are coming your way. And that kind of shows you, all right, I'm not just completely delusional, because you can be if you're not getting any validation. So you want to kind of get a sense of that. But as you probably know, like your attention may start getting pulled elsewhere as other things come into play. Like, okay, well, you're trying to build a business, or I need to make a niche, and I need to do all this stuff, and you get pulled, and then you start paying attention to people that you normally would not pay attention to. And I found myself doing this too. Like I the other day I was on YouTube listening to like some business guru person that I normally would not listen to, but at the time I was just thinking about, well, how do I like get the numbers to go up? And then I'm thinking, why am I listening to this dude? Like, it was actually a moment where I had to ask myself that, and it's because, oh well, my inner compass is blown. It's like the pointer's not aligned, and but in that moment I could see that because I'm so aware of what mastery means to me and how my definition of that has been shifted. So I really think that you can you can live in a way where you can not just function, but you can thrive in the world by committing to this model of mastery and also being inspired by the select few that you have chosen that act as models for that mastery.
And probably be okay with knowing that the blueprint won't be as easily articulated as someone else who can say, oh, if you want to focus your numbers, here are the three things that you need to do. And to know that it takes not just the wisdom of someone else, but also yourself to actually align the two things together. Because other people can tell us, hey, here's how you do it externally. But how do we want to show up in a way that it works for us? That's the work that we have to do. And we don't have to compare with anyone else except for ourselves, which I think is a very freeing thought.
Yeah, I mean, knowledge is basically wisdom you haven't experienced yourself. It's information that has been dispensed by other people that have experienced it and are trying to, present it as ideas and so forth. But, knowledge is not understanding. It's like knowledge is taught through information, but understanding is taught through experience. So you can, as you say, like, yeah, you can absorb information and knowing that it's not going to be as neatly outlined as this what this person is sharing, because all knowledge that is resonant is distilled. It's simplified in a sense. That's why it resonates. But only you have to take that knowledge, like spread it onto the map of your own life, and then find out that as you're walking it, oh, there's a stumble here. There was this crack in the terrain that wasn't articulated by this person. And that only happens when you actually walk it. And I think that's what mastery is too. It's like you're not just living in your head, you're actually walking it. And wanting to do that is what will kind of reveal to you, oh, how that person's knowledge may have worked in that context, but this is the way that I internalize it myself, right? Like we're just all remixing other people's knowledge and then testing it with own own intuition, our own experience, and then we take that and then we distribute that as knowledge to others, and then the cycle continues. And that's a beautiful thing. I think that's what makes the world so awesome, is that we all want to at some point test what we have picked up in our own lives, and that is curiosity.
I think we should end here on this curiosity note because In Lawrence's book, The Inner Compass, you're going to find so many moments of curiosity. Oh, I haven't thought about it this way. Oh, if I just shift the frame a little bit, a whole new world opens, a new way of being, a new way of thinking about what it is that we want to do will open up. Thank you so much for chatting with us, Lawrence. This has been such a mind blowing experience.
Oh, thanks so much, Vicky. I mean, you're like a paragon of curiosity, and I feel like you're continuously on that pursuit. So yeah, it's an honor to be here and to talk with you.
No, thank you so much. And check out Lawrence's book down below. Thank you for your time.